El Alamein was fought with tanks, mines, artillery, aircraft, and infantry, but it was also fought through messages. Before engines started and guns opened, commanders tried to discover what the enemy knew, what the enemy planned, and what the enemy could still supply. In the desert, where distance was vast and movement could be rapid, information was not a luxury, it was a weapon. Radio traffic, intercepted reports, decoded messages, reconnaissance flights, captured documents, and careless signals all influenced real battlefield decisions. The intelligence war around El Alamein matters because it shows armored warfare as a contest of perception as well as force. Rommel's earlier advantages had depended partly on knowing too much, but by the autumn of 1942, the balance of information was shifting decisively toward the Allies.
If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore.
Mechanized armies produce signals because they cannot function without communication. A tank force moving across the desert needs orders, fuel reports, route instructions, repair requests, reconnaissance updates, and warnings about enemy movement. Each message helps the army act, but each message also creates risk. If the enemy can read the content, identify the sender, track the volume of traffic, or notice sudden silence, then communication becomes evidence. In a slow battle, intelligence may arrive too late to matter. In a mechanized battle, it can arrive just in time to place guns, move reserves, or decide whether a threat is real. El Alamein therefore belongs to the history of armored warfare, not only because of what moved across the desert, but because of what passed invisibly through the air. One of the strangest and most important intelligence stories before El Alamein involved Bonner Fellers, the American military attaché in Cairo. Fellers was a capable observer who sent detailed reports to Washington about British strength, morale, plans, and problems in the Middle East. The danger was that his reports were transmitted in a diplomatic cipher that Axis intelligence had penetrated. For a time, German and Italian intelligence could read material that gave them a valuable window into Allied affairs. This did not mean Rommel received a perfect map of every British intention, and it did not make Allied defeat automatic. But it gave the Axis commander a source of insight that no opponent should have had. In a campaign where timing and confidence mattered so much, even partial knowledge could sharpen decisions. The Fellers leak helps explain why intelligence should never be imagined as a single dramatic secret. It was more like a continuing stream of impressions, British anxieties, force estimates, command tensions, and expectations about operations. Such information helped the Axis judge opportunities and risks during an already fluid campaign. It could confirm what reconnaissance suggested, or warn that an enemy was weaker than he wished to appear. Yet the advantage was temporary. Once the compromise was recognized and the communications channel changed in 1942, the stream dried up. By the time Montgomery was preparing the October offensive, Rommel no longer enjoyed that same window into Allied thinking. The closing of the leak was one part of a broader reversal in the intelligence balance. Another part of that reversal came from the loss of a German signals intelligence unit associated with Captain Alfred Seebohm. Seebohm commanded a specialist formation that monitored British wireless traffic in the desert, exploiting insecure transmissions, call signs, procedures, and patterns of communication. Such work could be enormously valuable without always requiring the breaking of the highest level codes. A careless radio net, a repeated phrase, a predictable call sign, or a sudden increase in messages could reveal where units were moving and what commanders were worried about. During the July fighting near Telefon El Isa on the northern part of the El Alamein line, Australian troops overran this German signals unit and captured equipment and documents. The loss damaged Axis battlefield intelligence at a critical moment. The Seebohm story is important because it brings intelligence down from the level of famous codebreakers to the level of frontline military practice. Signals intelligence in the desert was not just a matter of distant offices reading polished documents. It involved trucks, aerials, operators, translators, analysts, and officers working close enough to the battlefield to feed information to commanders quickly. It also depended on enemy mistakes. If British units transmitted too freely, German listeners could exploit them. If German signals specialists were placed too near a vulnerable front, they could be captured. Intelligence was active, risky, and physical. The destruction or capture of a signals unit could change what an army knew the next day, and in mobile warfare, the next day might be decisive. On the Allied side, the most famous intelligence advantage was ultra. The name later associated with intelligence derived from breaking high-level encrypted Axis communications, including messages protected by the German Enigma machine. For commanders in the field, ultra did not arrive as a magical voice announcing the future. It passed through careful channels, was protected by strict secrecy, and had to be combined with other forms of evidence, such as aerial photography, prisoner interrogation, patrol reports, and traffic analysis. Its value lay in pattern and confirmation. It could reveal supply shortages, shipping movements, command concerns, and sometimes enemy intentions. In the Desert War, where Rommel's operations were constrained by fuel and replacement problems, knowing the shape of those constraints gave the Allies a powerful advantage. Supply intelligence was especially important because the Axis army in Egypt lived at the end of a long and vulnerable chain. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and vehicles had to cross the Mediterranean, reach North African ports, and then travel overland across enormous distances. Allied codebreaking and signals work helped identify shipping movements and the wider state of Axis logistics, while air and naval forces attacked the supply system physically. Intelligence and force worked together. A convoy discovered but not attacked did not solve the problem. An attack launched without good information might miss the crucial target. When Allied commanders understood that Rommel was short of fuel, they could interpret his battlefield options more realistically. They could see not only where he was, but what he could afford to do. The intelligence balance also affected Alamein, the battle that preceded the October offensive. Montgomery had reason to expect that Rommel would try to break through in the south and turn the British position from behind. That expectation came from reading the terrain, studying the enemy's habits, and receiving intelligence that helped clarify the danger. The result was preparation rather than panic. British armor was placed to block the thrust. Mines and guns were arranged to slow and channel it, and air power was ready to add pressure. Intelligence did not stop Axis tanks by itself. It allowed the defenders to meet a mobile attack with a prepared system. In armored warfare, that distinction is crucial because knowing the likely direction of the blow can turn movement into vulnerability. By October, Montgomery's offensive preparations also depended on a broad intelligence picture. The Eighth Army needed to know the shape of the Axis minefields, the location of defensive belts, the placement of reserves, the condition of enemy formations, and the supply situation behind the front. No intelligence source answered all of those questions alone. Patrols probed the minefields at great risk. Aircraft photographed enemy positions. Interrogators questioned prisoners. Signals analysts studied traffic. Ultra added insight into Axis command and supply. The final picture was still imperfect, and soldiers would discover many unpleasant truths only when they entered the minefields under fire. But imperfect knowledge can still be decisive if it is better than the enemy's knowledge, and if commanders use it with discipline. Rommel, by contrast, increasingly had to make decisions in a fog that was thickening around him. He still had reconnaissance units, experienced staff officers, frontline reports, and tactical skill. The Axis were not blind. But the loss of earlier intelligence advantages, combined with Allied deception and growing air superiority, made it harder for him to judge the true weight and timing of the British offensive. This mattered because a commander with limited fuel and limited reserves cannot cover every possibility equally. If he misreads the enemy's main effort, he may move too late or commit strength to the wrong sector. At El Alamein, intelligence did not remove Rommel's ability to fight, but it narrowed his ability to shape the battle before it overwhelmed him. The next stage of the story, Operation Bertram, would show that intelligence and deception are partners. It is not enough to know the enemy. A commander also tries to manage what the enemy knows about him. Dummy tanks, false supply dumps, disguised vehicles, and misleading patterns of movement were designed to make the Eighth Army's preparations harder to interpret. That deception worked best in an environment where the enemy was already struggling to collect and evaluate reliable information. Ultra, the Fellers leak, and the Seebohm unit all belong to this same larger theme. The Desert War was a battle between observation and concealment, between radio discipline and interception, between true signals and false appearances. Armored movement was visible, but its meaning could still be hidden. For the development of armored warfare, the intelligence story at El Alamein is a warning against thinking only in terms of machines and firepower. Tanks need speed, but speed without information can drive them into minefields or anti-tank screens. Commanders need radios, but radios can betray patterns. Supply columns need orders, but those orders may reveal shortages and intentions. The more mechanized an army becomes, the more it depends on communication, and the more its communications become a battlefield of their own. By 1942, the radio had become as central to armored warfare as the track and the gun. It allowed dispersed forces to move quickly, but it also gave skilled enemies something to hear, study, and exploit. Ultra, Fellers, and Seebohm therefore tell one of the most important hidden stories of El Alamein. Earlier in the Desert War, Rommel benefited from Allied vulnerabilities in communication and from a signals apparatus that helped him read the battlefield. By the time of the decisive battle, the direction of advantage had changed. The Allies had closed dangerous leaks, damaged Axis signals intelligence, protected their own high-grade intelligence, and combined codebreaking with reconnaissance, air power, deception, and logistics. None of this made the infantry's night advance safe, or the tank crew's passage through minefields easy. The battle still had to be fought in dust, darkness, and fire. But intelligence altered the odds before the first barrage began, and at El Alamein, those altered odds helped turn preparation into victory.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.